Welcome back to the Health Tech Edge. I'm Mike Moore. Today, we're talking about something every healthcare organization is wrestling with: how to prepare for the future with AI and keep that human touch. My guest is Ben Tasker. He's led AI and data initiatives in both higher education and healthcare, including projects that improved cancer risk detection and critical care prediction. Ben's also behind National Grid's Data and AI Academy, where he's helping 36,000 employees build AI fluency. Ben, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
All right. So you've got quite a unique background: healthcare, data science, academia, now large scale AI workforce programs. How did you find your way into this space and what drew you into it?
My own journey is similar to a lot of folks listening's journey or soon to be journey. That journey was just from my own personal experience, finding something maybe that I wasn't that great at. And my undergraduate degree is in healthcare, which is why I started in a hospital setting. And in that experience, I was really excited as a recent graduate. I thought I could conquer the world. I'm going into these healthcare systems and I'm starting to see some gaps. And one of the gaps was the data. Yes, this hospital system had electronic medical records. They had offices all over the place, and the physicians were trained to use that system. The complex part of it is when you're asked to report on each physician's practice to get patient levels, volumes, what they're being seen for, the amount of time they're being seen. Sure, that sounds like maybe an easy report to some individuals to report back to the healthcare system on how each physician's doing, but it's really a human-centered problem, because even though this is a report and it's going to go to whoever makes those bigger decisions, it also impacts or has the potential to impact individuals' care. And so it's a human problem. And that's what made me just start to think, okay, well, if this is a human problem, I need to go and talk to the actual providers to see how they're capturing this data. It's more than just a report at this point. So I met with a couple of the providers. I had them come in and they showed me how they're doing the data. And one of the providers actually brought paper and like thousands of pages of paper and dropped it like in front of me. I was blown back. And he's like, yes, this data in your system is accurate, but I haven't been able to add all this other data to it because I'm so far behind taking care of my patients. There's just not enough time in a day. Seems reasonable. But now think about that at scale. So how do we report this? So bringing this back to my own upskilling and reskilling journey, I realized that I had a lack of data literacy. It wasn't from not understanding what data is, but it's from not understanding how data works in an ecosystem. So I wanted to set out to try to not only enhance my own data literacy, but figure out ways to automate this data ingestion issue, not only to help the system, but I'm assuming if this healthcare system's having an issue, other organizations must be. So I took a more traditional path, even though at this time period it wasn't that traditional, because I have a data science master's degree, and data science is still kind of new. It's new in today's time, but back then it was really innovative. There weren't a lot of master's degrees in data science available. There are a lot of MBA programs that had data science in it, or computer science programs that taught data science, but there wasn't a data science program by itself. And even though the two other programs I just mentioned, business and computer science, those are great pathways, I'm always usually a little bit different. Data science combines both of those realms. It focuses on the computer science and the business. And that's really what drew me to do that. And so I completed the program. I understood now that these are data science algorithms, but data science is now becoming AI. So I understand the AI algorithms, how to apply them. And I really helped to mitigate my own data literacy. But now I'm out in the workforce and I'm realizing that a lot of organizations have data literacy shortfalls and upskilling needs. So how can we enable those employees to collect data, better data to feed into these AI algorithms and ultimately systems-based processes?
Yeah, so in many ways, it's the same problems that we've always been trying to solve with technology, right? It's just, AI provides some new opportunities. And what I think is really great about your story is that many technologists, especially, they'll never admit that they don't know something. They will run straight at it and just kind of keep on, trying to answer the question. I think it's important and courageous to take a step back and say, like, there's a little bit more that I need to learn, especially learning from the end users or learning from your internal customers, or however you want to label those folks. But to take that step back, show empathy for the user, and try to understand Who are the people who are contributing the data in this case? How are we going to then report on it? What's the impact of that data on them? How do we help serve them as well as serve the true customers in a healthcare setting, which is the patients, right? The people who are walking in and out of the hospital or the doctor's office every single day. I admire your focus and your path that you followed to gain that understanding. So now, kind of updating to that point in your career, you've made your progress, you've done your master's program, and now you've got kind of a unique story you told me when we first met about studying waveform data in kind of this critical care setting. So do you want to walk us through that chapter of your work and kind of what you did and how you applied AI in a real healthcare setting?
Sure. So before we get to the waveform data, there are a couple steps in the process for those listening. I worked with students in an academic setting, and through that work, I then met some faculty members doing some research, and that research then transformed and evolved into the waveform research. So now that we're at that point in the story, the
Yeah.
waveform research is similar to the other types of algorithms that I developed, but now we're focusing on live data. So waveform data is called dynamic data. It's live, it updates theoretically every second if the system can handle that. In this system, it's 1 to every 5 minutes. And waveforms can be anything that a bedside monitor can collect. So it can be blood pressure, oxygen levels, if you're connected to a machine like an aspirator or a ventilator. Any of those machines that connect to it also have waveforms. If you have an Apple Watch or a similar type of watch, that has waveforms. We're not collecting that data, but I'm just providing some examples of what a waveform is. So think of it as dynamic data, happens in real time, and it can really help with these algorithms and evaluation. In a healthcare setting, there's also this department called the CTICU, which is the Cardiothoracic Intensive Care Unit. It's the most critical patients probably in a hospital. They're having some sort of open heart surgery, a valve put in their heart, a bypass surgery, something that hopefully a lot of individuals listening don't have, but some patients do have this. And these physicians are highly trained to be able to perform that operation and make sure that you obtain the care that you need. In the CTICU, the patients typically stay a little bit longer than most of us are accustomed to. We try to get them out of the hospital before 30 days, but they might stay there longer than 30 days. And if a patient stays in a healthcare setting, whether it's a CTICU or not, but especially in a CTICU, we have to understand that infections and other critical cases can occur. So you really want to try to get them out of the healthcare setting, just because the longer they're there, it's actually more damaging to their health than, which is kind of a reversal thought, but very true. So this algorithm is something that I consider human augmented, where we still use the traditional way of doing things. It's just a validation system at this point. So we don't have FDA approval. We're doing it with a process that already exists. That process is called evidence-based medicine. In evidence-based medicine in a CTICU, there's an algorithm that has 7 variables. Depending upon why the patient's there, it's not always the same 7 variables, but some of the variables can change. But some of those variables are the time they've been seen, the type of surgery they had, their demographics, the intensity of the surgery, and the other variables change depending upon what happened. Usually it's 85% accurate. So based upon these 7 variables with real input, we know if a patient's gonna potentially live or not live in the scenario. So
Yeah.
that's the setup.
Yeah.
Now, with the algorithm, we have much more than 7 variables because we have dynamic data and we have EMR data, which is the static data that when you go see your doctor, they're typing information into. So you can combine the two. The complexity is that with this, the physician and the care team's already strapped looking at these 7 other variables, the current way they currently do business. How do you help augment that process? And it's really an alert system. So this algorithm, based upon the waveforms that's being collected, every 5 minutes can collect heart rate, blood pressure. And that might seem like, why do we care so much about that? But if you have an infection, even a small decrease in either of those 2 metrics could be a cause for concern. Doesn't mean you always have an infection, but the regular system may not account for that. So typically in this scenario, you would obtain an infection and then you would be treated for it. This algorithm says, hey, so-and-so might have an infection. You might want to check that out, or they might get sepsis, or maybe they haven't moved in a while. They could get bed sores, whatever the case may be. You might want to go check them out. and then the physicians and the care team can decide how they want to respond. So that's the augmentation portion. But just by going through this, we've been able to save 1,000 lives. We're trying to move towards FDA approval. So that means we need much more data. We need to show that there's clinical gains out of this model. But right now, again, it's augmented, and it's being more able to understand what the system can do versus just quickly implementing it and saying that we can fix the system.
Yeah, I think, everyone, whether you've been in that kind of environment yourself as a patient or as a caregiver, most people have probably seen an episode or two of ER or some show like that on television, and you've seen the alarms going off on those bedside monitors, and the crash cart comes in or something like that in kind of these, super critical situations. Some of that happens in the real world, right? And we see these things happen, unfortunately. The notion that AI algorithms can be developed like the project you're mentioning that can try to anticipate some of those things that may happen to a given patient and provide early warnings versus the alert in kind of the alarm going off, and the ability to have greater survival rates from these complex surgeries and interventions is amazing. So, it's critical, obviously, that people trust the information when you're rolling it out so that they look at it and say, oh, the computer is acting up, right? We hear this all the time. You call into customer service line, somebody says, oh, my computer's acting up. Can you hold on for a minute, right? So these are obviously critical real-time data kind of systems, but just in general in healthcare, I think is really a key piece in making sure that uh, when we put AI-based tools in front of users, especially highly trained healthcare professionals like you're talking about, the doctors, the nurses, the technicians, the support staff, we want them to trust that information that's being presented to them. So how do you think about that in terms of preparing a workforce for adoption of these types of AI applications? What are some words of wisdom to share with the audience about how to convince people that they can trust and they should trust some of these AI-based tools?
So this is two complexities. The first complexity is implementing AI and then training around that AI for a care team to use it. And then the other complexity is just training around AI in general, upskilling, reskilling an organization so that they're ready for that AI enablement portion of whatever you're trying to implement in the future. So it doesn't necessarily have to be right now. For the first part, for the upskilling and reskilling, it's introducing all staff, not just clinical staff, any staff that works at your organization to AI, what the A and the I mean, the definition of it, some theory examples, some examples of what's going on out in the environment, and then what the organization's doing around AI, just to make them aware. Then you dig a little bit deeper, and now you're working with the care team. So hopefully they've gone through this learning journey of what AI is. There's a little bit of an understanding. And now they understand that they're trying to augment with AI, not be replaced by AI or replacing a process with AI, but working with it, a blended workforce, not blended in the sense of remote or hybrid, but augmented in the sense of AI or human, blended workforce. So that's a thing that the World Economic Forum talks about. But once you have your system conceptualized, you bring it to a committee. And that committee has to be cross-organizational, not just the critical care team, but anybody that's impacted by this algorithm. And in this case, including patients or patients that want to be involved. You define what the algorithm's doing. You are transparent about it. What happens when the AI does something wrong, what the real outcome is. So it's really defining a product. And a lot of research and a lot of AI and even systems aren't defined as a product, but we're really making a product because you're designing something completely new, and you're putting it into a system that hasn't seen it. And that system in healthcare is already complex, so you add another complexity to it, and it could fail. And these are $1 million examples, so you don't want them to fail. So we define the people, then we define the product. So those are the first two steps. You have to understand your process, in this case, the system. So a lot of organizations like Google, Amazon, a lot of other ones are focused on point solutions where they implement AI in one corner of the business, but they don't implement it across the board. Maybe not Amazon, not Google, but there's other organizations that then do mass layoffs, which is why I think a lot of folks are nervous about AI. Instead of being amplified by it, they're anxious. And eventually down the road, we're seeing 95% of the time that organizations have to rehire all the folks that they laid off due to an AI improvement. And then they have to hire more people back. So there's really no cost savings is the point I'm trying to say. But it's understanding that system. In our case, we had to understand how the bedside monitors worked, what the CTICU does, what their current evidence-based medicine system is doing, the algorithm that they currently use, and then how this alert system integrates with everything and how we can actually collect the data. And that took about a year. And then at the last point of that, we thought about the privacy. So how are we going to make this secure? So yes, you have the committee. Yes, you have all your data definitions. Yes, we understand what could go wrong, or at least have some concepts of what could go wrong. But the privacy is, how is this data and algorithm secure, just like any other system that this healthcare organization has? And how, even though this could go back into people, I put it under privacy, how are we talking to our patients about it? So the patients have to be alert. They have to understand that their information is going into an algorithm that is transparent and accountable, and how this might benefit them, and they can opt in or out. Most patients opt in because it's an alert system, an augmentation, and we're taking the time with the clinical team to talk about the systems change instead of not telling them, which is an option. So the 4 pillars in summaries: people, privacy, product, and process. And it's an agile approach, which means that you're doing all of those things constantly all the time. And even though it might sound like it's a really good process, you always have to caution on the side of error that something's probably going to go wrong more likely than not.
Yeah, and I think that what makes sense about it is, again, is not a process that is new in the industry, as far as technology goes, right? Many people have been using it for some time for software development, and now we're getting into all these AI scenarios. So not everything goes out the window, right? There are best practices, training and approaches and systems and tools and things that we've been using for some time that are well proven. But I do think that your advice here is really important, that AI does present some new, some incredible new opportunities, but also some new fear and risk for many organizations. And I think that's my kind of observation, is a lot of it's the black box nature of so many of these AI solutions. People can't really explain how it does what it does, or the information that it puts out. Think about, people when they first started using ChatGPT just to experiment with it, and realized you could get it to produce all these things, but how did it, where did it come up with all of this, right? And there were some AI hallucinations, and I think a lot of that has gotten better. But I still think that AI has somewhat of a bad brand image because of what's happened over the last couple of years. And so you take it now into a healthcare setting where, you can't take a nurse who's been trained and in the field for 30 years taking care of patients and all of a sudden tell them not to trust their own observation skills or their own training, things that they've done, because now you've got this new AI thing. It has to be, I think, like you're pointing out, help augment what they're doing, give them another tool, but don't take away their existing tools. Now is not the time for that. How do I think you say, amplifying what people do best, right? So play to the strengths of the humans, play to the strengths of the AI, but bring those together and help them collaborate, in this case, to take great care of patients and make sure that we're all giving the healthy outcomes that we want to deliver.
Absolutely. And it's really understanding that even though you're focusing on creating a system, you're also designing a product, and that product mindset might be easier for more technical people, but in anything outside of technology, agile and the product mindset aren't as common as a lot of people may think. So it's also training folks on that mindset and that methodology, because that's what you really need for the system to survive.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now in kind of your current focus, you're working on an incredibly large workforce program around AI readiness and preparation. What have been some of the surprises as you've gotten into this, or is there anything surprising in terms of the way that the workforce is reacting or leaders are reacting, and kind of how you're getting into things? Anything that's kind of surprised you, especially given your experience over the last several years?
One element that's super surprising, maybe it's not as surprising now, but it was surprising when I encountered it, is how fast organizations are trying to implement AI. It's happening so quickly that organizations aren't really thinking about how they're going to train their employees. It's kind of an afterthought. And organizations that create a learning plan in conjunction with AI implementation produce 52% more revenue, meaning that it's successful, than organizations that don't. And that's been measured since 2022. So since ChatGPT was enabled. Also, individuals that pursue some sort of learning, so pursue the learning plan, produce or a premium on their wages, about a 50% premium. So the organization makes more than 50% in revenue, and an individual gets paid 50% more. So it's a win-win. You just don't see it as much because there's so much negative news around AI and replacement instead of augmentations. In these implementations, we're seeing that since the training around the AI is a secondary thought, first of all, that's not a complete systems approach because the training should have been thought before you implement it. Secondly, the individuals that are responsible for implementing the system, the employees, there's not as much buy-in because they don't understand how they fit. So because they don't understand how they fit and the AI is being thrown on top of it, the AI is being set up to fail. And so that's really surprising. So how do you train your employees on how to use AI and think about this new AI technology in form of skills? So there's many different types of skills taxonomies. A skill taxonomy is how you create your organization plan. And one of them is produced by the World Economic Forum. And the reason why I love the World Economic Forums is because they put skills into two categories. AI skills, and they call them AI skills. They don't call them technical skills. They don't call them computer science skills, AI skills. And those AI skills are skills that are worth a premium right now for humans, but eventually AI is going to be very good at those skills and they might not be as valuable. So some examples of that: coding, prompt engineering, analysis, pretty much anything that you can use a computer with or a desk job with could probably fit under the AI skills category. The other set of skills are known as human skills. And what's beautiful about the human skills is that they're very unique to humans. AI can replicate some of these skills like empathy, leadership, communication, but ultimately humans, no matter how good the AI gets, will probably still be driving those skills just because humans like humans in some of these elements, and AI is going to hit a barrier. So you define all the skills within these two categories that the organization either has or needs to have for the strategic plan that they're going towards, usually a 5-year plan. And then they try to figure out how to get the employees to train towards the skills. So usually there's a skills assessment involved. Every employee needs to take it. Skills assessment really says what you're good at and maybe some areas that you can grow in. So the example I always like to give is the Michelin star restaurant. There's a select number of restaurants in the world that are Michelin star. The chef there is probably one of the best chefs in the world. They spent the time to earn that certification, and you're probably going to get a really good meal. You're probably not going to get food poisoning. Same thing with any other skill: prompt engineering, coding, leadership, communication. There's different levels of skills within that, and obtainment can be defined by either mentorship, obtaining some sort of certification, sometimes degrees, sometimes badges, whatever you want to call that, or a mix of both. And because AI is happening so quickly, the mix of both, I think, is becoming more relevant. So workforce and academia are going to have to work even closer together to try to certify these skills, because AI and the AI revolution is probably happening faster than anything before it. So the 4-year timeline for a degree might not be fast enough in this new economy.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think that the opportunity for so many is to think about how they're applying AI to the business problems that they're trying to solve. And I think your point earlier about bringing in all the different constituencies. So who ultimately is going to sit in front of this AI tool? Who's going to be advised or coached or augmented or assisted by it? Let them be part of the process from the beginning. And then thinking about the training program that's going to go along with this. I think for technologists who have been in the industry for a long time, user adoption has been, the success and failure of many, many, many initiatives over the years. We could come up with many examples of successes and failures, right? And that's where I think, again, things don't completely go out the window because we're now talking about AI. It's kind of keeping those best practices. But end user training, I think, is one of the things that has really suffered, especially from cost cutting initiatives, right? Like, we'll just put some self-paced training in front of people. Even if we're rolling out a new version of Microsoft Office, or now you've got Teams, or now you've got Zoom, or whatever it happens to be, just guessing that people will figure it out. And there are some people who will figure it out, but they're probably, I would guess, and you're the professional in kind of the workforce readiness stuff. I would guess it's less than 10% of the users will actually go figure it out and really be power users. I think then you've got everyone else that you've got, somewhere across the chasm there of people who will be pulled into it or, somehow kind of muddle through it. We obviously want people to feel like they are empowered by the tools that they're using. And going back to your example from the beginning, in the clinical setting, you've got a doctor who's seeing patients all day, but spends hours and hours in kind of what, is called pajama time in the evening, right? Like sitting in their pajamas, trying to get all their clinical notes put into the record so that it's there. People are struggling and people are getting burnt out. And if people are willing to dedicate their lives and their careers to healthcare and caring for others, they didn't do it because they have a strong desire to do healthcare paperwork for hours and hours every day, right? They want to spend time with the people. And I think the things that we can do with training programs to help enable people to trust the tools, to make sure that the tools are actually addressing problems that need to be solved and that they want to use the tools to solve, gives us a great opportunity as we kind of pull the elements together. So any parting words or final advice to healthcare leaders, Ben, on some of the opportunities as they look at their AI initiatives for the rest of this year and into next?
I would start with the learning plan. So what's our learning plan, not just for AI, make sure it's included if it's in your strategy, but what's our learning plan for the skills our organization needs to master for this strategic plan to be successful? Second, follow-up question to that is how are we going to have our employees learn skills that maps to that plan? And then how are we going to encourage our employees to make their own learning plan so that we can monitor and understand that our strategy for this is actually being successful, and then worry about AI. It seems like this might add some time, but it actually speeds up the time because you're able to identify your AI processes, your AI systems, and you're able to map those skills to the AI. And you might even find new processes and procedures that you didn't even realize AI could help you with because you're setting this up correctly from the beginning.
Yeah, that's great. Super. Ben, this has been a great conversation, very practical, very grounded, really human focused, which I think we all need as a good reminder and can appreciate. So for folks who want to keep up with Ben and his work, you can go to bentascherai.com or connect with Ben on LinkedIn. And Ben, thanks for joining us today and sharing your wisdom with the audience.
Thanks for having me, Mike. This was fun.
All right. And thanks for joining the Health Tech Edge. If you enjoy the conversations, please like and share with a colleague and tune in next time for the next episode of the podcast. Thanks so much.